Dr. Mark Changizi here with your Science Moment. Today I'm going to talk about who is hurt by online censorship by Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and government pressure on those big tech companies to do. Who's being hurt? Now, at first glance, you might say, look, who's being hurt? Well, it's folks like me and Michael Sanger and Daniel Kotzen, my co-litigants in our lawsuit. Barrico Gatto and Alex Berenson, and many dozens of others from Team Reality that have been censored. It's these individuals that have been censored. And then you could say, well, maybe it's a little bit beyond that. Maybe it's also just the folks from Team Reality and from the anti-lockdowners in general. This misunderstands who is being damaged by censorship. And it comes, there's sort of a similar moral within economics. It's more than 50 years old. There was a great essay whose pencil, and I'm having a mental block of the fellow's name that wrote it. And the moral of the essay, I, pencil, was that, and the question is in some sense, and it was a first person perspective written from the perspective of the pencil, him or herself, who is responsible for the pencil? How is it? How many people are responsible? There's different ways to phrase it. And the moral of the story is sure, there may be some particular pencil company that's outputting the pencils. And so in that sense, that company is the one that made the pencil. But if you start asking yourself, well, how many people in society, how much of the economy percentage-wise is responsible or is necessary to make that particular pencil, slowly but surely it just keeps expanding and expanding and expanding, and you realize that, whoa, the entire economy is required. And it's not like there was some organized central committee at that company or in some group of companies or by the government that says, okay, let's put together the resources to here are the specific resources that we need to build a pencil. No, the entire economy is needed. Because to make the equipment that, spins the pieces of wood requires, there's another, 500 parts there. And then to make the things that go to the parts of the world that have the graphite and so forth, all of these things start to expand outwards and expand outwards and expand outwards. And the entire economy is needed to make the pencil, to make every single thing, all the little pieces in our world that we rely on. It is a decentralized, distributed process that happens. And I think there's a lot of folks who have a good impression about that. Not enough. I mean, this is the constant debate amongst left and right, traditional left and right kinds of arguments, is those who don't understand that the economy relies on these decentralized processes, and those that do understand this. But I think it's even more counterintuitive for free expression. So you could phrase it in a similar sort of way. That is the question that I started with, which is who is being damaged. Another way to say that is that who is responsible for certain kinds of truths when there are truths that are found. So, like, for example, one of my discoveries concerns why we see illusions, why we see, when there's a bunch of radial lines and you've got two vertical lines and you perceive the vertical lines to bow outwards. They sort of to look curved. That's one of the discoveries that I'm known for. And it has to do with perceiving the present. Your brain has perceptual delays, and those radial lines look like optic flow. Your brain interprets them as if you're moving forward and says, okay, I'm going to generate a perception not of what those two vertical lines look like, but what they're going to look like in the next moment were I moving forward, which is what the stimulus suggests that I'm doing. Anyway, for me to have made that discovery, you could say, okay, who's responsible for that discovery? And you go, okay, Mark Changizi is responsible for that discovery. Well, yeah, just like the particular pencil company is responsible for building that pencil, and we give attribution to that company. But how much of the economy is responsible for building that pencil? The analogous question would be how much of the scientific / just intelligence of society itself, and what a society as a whole has learned, not just science, is broader than science. How much of all of that wisdom and knowledge does that particular discovery of mine rely on? What percentage? Is it just 1%? Is it just me and two other people prior to me, or the people that I cite in that paper? No, there's a sense in which if you start walking this through, well, there's certainly all the papers that I cited, and then there's the research that I had to do, let's say the psychophysics experiments that I did myself, which required, well, an entire computer And that requires, of course, 400,000 different kinds of pieces of equipment, which require their own, industrial processing manufacturing plants, which has another million parts. And so you start thinking this through. It spread through the entire economy. My discovery, my information or idea world spreads through the entire economy, and it also spreads because each of those things also relies on discoveries by others. Just as we say, my discovery stands on the shoulders of all of these people before me. And it's not just, 17 people or some small, no, it's the entire history of knowledge, the whole network of science and knowledge more generally that any different discovery relies upon, as well as the economy. These things blend from the information side, the idea side, to the economy side, and back and forth. So when you start to see it this way, each discovery stands on the back of the entire network, just as each pencil and each product relies and stands on the back of the entire economy, created in an undirected, distributed fashion. Now then you can ask yourself, well, who's being hurt? Let's go back to the first question. Who's being hurt by the censorship of, let's say, the 100 or so Team Reality folks that have been leaders that have been censored, as well as tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of others who have been just kicked off or censored in various ways, and anything along these lines, narratives that are opposed to the mainstream narrative have been censored. Is it the 100 or so leaders? Is it the 1,000 folks sort of circulating around? Is it the 100,000? Who's being hurt? Well, once you understand that these networks function at the whole level, at the level of the entire community, and that any of these discoveries, any of these economic products, any of these idea products rely on all of it. When you're censoring one individual or 10 or 1,000 individuals, who's being hurt is the entire network, because their discoveries, their ideas, whether it's a product or an idea, is not able to then be the backbone upon which somebody else stands atop it, and then somebody else, and so forth. The short story here is that who's being hurt by this censorship is everybody. Everybody is being hurt because the network as a whole is being handicapped by virtue of one narrative, or potentially multiple narratives that are against some particular mainstream narrative, are all being suppressed. This would be like deciding, okay, we're no longer going to use wood. The government just says we're censoring wood. Well, it's going to be, pencils are going to be very difficult to make. You're going to have to suddenly switch different kinds. The whole economy is going to be handicapped by virtue of that when you censor certain kinds of materials and certain kinds of ideas. Or only, wood can be used, but you're not allowed to put wood on lathes. That's totally bad. So again, these are fundamental. Yeah, that's going to specifically hurt, let's say 7,000 companies who do something like that. But then indirectly, it's going to affect all the companies those companies fed into. Other companies relied on those companies, and then millions and hundreds of millions of people relied on those companies, which relied on companies which relied on those that would use wood and lathes. These things are all interconnected. The damages that the federal government, that Twitter and and Facebook and YouTube, the damages are not just to me and my co-litigants. They're not just to Team Reality folks. They're not just to a handful of finite people. The damage is to you. The damage is to our opposition. The damage is to everybody. What they're doing is holding back the slow trudge towards the truth, the slow trudge towards moral discoveries, the slow trudge towards economic discoveries and economic wealth. All these things are interconnected. So you need to stop thinking of this as, wow, look what this intolerance from these companies and the government is doing to these handful of individuals. It's not about the handful of individuals. It's about what they're doing to all of us. And that was your science moment.